Hey guys, this is just going to be a quick video to show you a Kullervo build I've been working on. And I'm not going to elaborate too much on Kullervo's abilities and all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to explain what the build does, and you can copy it for yourself and do whatever you want. Maybe modify it in various ways, but I'll tell you what is absolutely necessary. So the build is a Reave build. Reave is one of those Helminth abilities that most of the community are sleeping on because it doesn't really seem too effective. It's mainly effective when Revenant uses it, because when you use Reave on a Thrall and you have a moderate amount of ability strength, then you're able to one-shot them. Because what Reave does is it drains enemy health. Now, the health is independent from armor and shields, meaning that if you can actually build up the Reave, quote-unquote, damage high enough, then the health drain, the value you see on the bottom, ignore it. It's not 119%. When it comes to actual mobs, it's closer to 24%. Forget about that. I'll get into that in a second. But most importantly, most players are sleeping on this ability despite all of the amazing things that it does. So first and foremost, it restores your health and shields. So that's really good. Second of all, it's a traversal ability. So with I guess, okay duration. This one, we don't have too much duration. We're actually nerfing our duration with Transient Fortitude. But overall, generally, Reave is decently good at traversal, despite it being expensive, because you're able to put this on warframes that don't have any other movement abilities. But we're not doing this for the movement, obviously. We're doing this for the health drain aspect. But a lot of players are sleeping on Reave because they can't contemplate a way, really, to make Reave kill enemies by itself. Now, the reason why you would use Reave is because this is pure damage scaling, but not only is it damage scaling in terms of you being able to deal with enemies of any level, it's damage scaling because it one-shots enemies regardless of their level, how much armor they have, and how much shield they have, and how much health they have, because this is based on the health percentage of the enemies. So now that out of the way, I'm going to explain what is absolutely a necessary component for this and what isn't. Molt Augmented is not necessary. This is just overkill ability strength because I can't think of anything better to put in this slot. If you can think of something you would prefer, put it here. This is not necessary. This is flexible. Arcane Truculence is what makes this whole build work, so this is absolutely necessary. I'm going to get into the exact combo in a bit. Cunning Drift, Augur Reach, and Stretch, or Archon Stretch. You can replace this with regular Stretch, but those are there to boost our range. Ideally, you would boost the range to 280, because range is what makes this build even better than anything else. Range is the second most important stat for this build, and the single most important stat for this build after you already have 295 ability strength. But the only way you can get Reave to work is with two conditions. 295 ability strength or above, and all enemies having 10 viral procs on them. So, if an enemy has 10 viral stacks, and you Reave through them with 295 ability strength, that is exactly enough by a fraction of a single ability strength point by a fraction of a percentage of max health to wipe out enemies. So again, if you Reave through an enemy with 10 viral stacks and your ability strength is at 295 and above, you will one-shot them. It doesn't work as well with Eximus units, but it does still work with Eximus units, because they have an extra armor that isn't really classified as armor by the game. It's like an extra, like the Overguard makes it act a bit differently. But if you Reave while you're Reaving, you make multiple passes through them, it still works. It works really good. And Acolytes, this works for Acolytes as well, but it takes multiple hits with Reave to actually drain their health. So you need to run through the same Acolyte 4, 5, 6 times, but it will eventually kill them. So just Reaving through enemies is enough to outright kill most normal enemies. It deals significant damage to Eximus units, and Eximus without Overguard, it will kill them in one shot. And it even deals with Acolytes. I haven't tested, or I haven't noticed it working too well on bosses, so maybe bosses are exempt from this effect, but some mini-bosses that act like Acolytes, they still are affected by this. So experiment however you see fit. Combat Discipline is absolutely necessary for this build, but for that I'll have to explain what our Arcane Truculence does. And for Arcane Truculence, I'll have to explain Vile Recompense, so Volatile Recompense, and to explain Volatile Recompense, I would have to explain Recompense. So Recompense with unaugmented, what it does is you cast it, you have blades spinning around you for a few seconds in an expanding circle, and they get launched in various directions, and then you can recast it to do the whole thing again. And when you hit enemies, you will end up gaining Overguard from hitting those enemies, and that Overguard cap is actually dependent on your ability strength, but the Overguard cap isn't really important whatsoever. And I'll get to that when I talk about Arcane Truculence. So now that we have this ability out of the way, what Volatile Recompense does is it deals blast damage, but moreover than that, the blades return to the ring. So you cast it once, and while it changes the ability to, instead of needing to be cast repeatedly, you cast it once, and then every blade that gets launched out comes back, but it still gives you Overguard. So you would cast this once, the blades keep spinning around you all the time, but they also go out and seek enemies with a radius of 15 meters, this is one of the reasons why you would actually want as much range as possible. But since that's not possible, and this build is kind of tight when it comes to the mod space, the maximum range that we can have is 190 with Cunning Drift, with Augur Reach, and with Stretch, or Archon Stretch. So like I said, the second most important stat is range, but we're not putting Overextended because it would nerf our ability strength to 238, and then we would need to get 250 kills for Molt Augmented to compensate for the negative 60 ability strength that you get from Overextended. So I would just say since most missions you won't really have the opportunity to get 250 kills, and you need a specific ability strength number, 295 exactly, or higher, then you have to actually have this ability strength. You can't really play around with it too much. So you would need Transient Fortitude, and Umbral Intensify, and Blind Rage. So all of these are absolutely necessary because we need 295 ability strength. Okay, Archon Continuity we need because we're going to be lowering our continuity of Transient Fortitude, and Archon Continuity is, again, one of those things that you must have duration. But if you can compensate for the ability duration by Archon Shards or other methods, then this slot may potentially be a flexible slot. Equilibrium is here as a method of generating energy because we don't have other methods of generating energy. And this whole build is based around pretty much spamming Reave whenever you have the opportunity of mobs getting 10 viral stacks. You would want to Reave through them. So you want to have enough energy to be able to cast your abilities. But again, this is a more flexible slot if you have alternate means of generating energy. So for example, if you put Arcane Energize instead, then you would probably swap this with Primed Flow. But again, we're getting sidetracked. That's energy generation. Do it however you see fit. But Equilibrium and Archon Continuity, there are ways to go around these. Everything else is obligatory. Now, Arcane Truculence is what it says is whenever you gain 3,000 or more Overguard, it releases a 30-meter, pretty crazy, radial attack that applies viral status stacks. What it doesn't say is that it applies... Oh, it does say it applies max viral status stacks, which is 10 stacks, which is exactly what we need for Reave to work. So, what we would need is to generate consistently 3,000 or more Overguard. But the problem is that the overguard is capped. So the overguard right now with this build is capped at 29,800. One of the reasons I put multi-augmented is so that it would go up as I kill enemies. But regardless, once you reach your cap, you can't generate any more overguard because you're already at your maximum. So you would not be able to generate chunks of 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, because whenever your overguard, let's say, drains by 500, you would only gain 500, and then you would need you would need 6 of those. That's just to trigger Arcane Truculence even once. That's where combat discipline comes into play. So when you kill enemies, it will take 10 health off. But since you have overguard, it will take 10 overguard off. So as you kill enemies, combat discipline is going to drain your overguard, but that's something you actually want to happen. You want your enemies to attack you. You want them to drain your overguard because however much damage you take, let's say you take 6,000 damage from your overguard, that means that you now have 2 more triggers of Arcane Truculence coming up. So combat discipline is there to make Arcane Truculence more consistent so that you will take away from your overguard. You want to drain your overguard as much as reasonable in order to trigger Arcane Truculence as much as possible. So that's why combat discipline is here. And Volatile Recompense, as I said, is there to... This makes the whole build work because it keeps your overguard generating consistently. Now, let's show you how this works in action. I'll not use any of the other abilities, well, maybe one, eventually, but let me show you how this works and how easy it is. So we have a bunch of enemies, right? I don't have my pet because I don't want it to... There you see that giant thing, that yellow wave that kept spreading? Let's try it again. Right? So as they attack me, they drain my overguard. There you go. You see that yellow line? Here's another one. So as they're attacking me, they're draining my overguard, and it's regenerating. So it keeps casting more and more instances of this. Whenever this casts, though, I reave through them, they're all dead. Let's show it one more time. Right, so you would cast this, and then they attack you, and then you see the wave, and then you reave through them, and they're one-shot easily. Now, one more thing that actually I'm going to test right now, because I haven't really bothered checking, is that you have this ability as well, that chains them together, and now when you reave through them, they just way more easily instantly die. That's actually what I thought happened. So, Kullervo's third ability, which is one of the best abilities in the game, in my opinion, you basically chain a whole lot of enemies together, and it still has 47 range, even though we're not running max range. So the range on this is pretty good. And you chain all enemies together, and 100% of the damage dealt to one is dealt to all instead. So if you reave through an enemy and you drain 100% of his health, that 100% of his health, let's say, is 1,000,000 health, and you drain 1,000,000 health, that 1,000,000 health will be converted into 1,000,000 damage dealt to all enemies that are connected with Collective Curse. This is a bonus because Reave obviously does the job just fine, but this helps you extend the range of the lethality of Reave, because Reave has a very short duration, it runs out pretty quickly, and its range is very limited, based on how long you can dash forward. But with this, you chain them so that you don't even have to reave all of them, really. You just reave a few. I do need energy, though. And it just kills everything. I hope you guys enjoyed. By the way, you could replace either the first ability or fourth ability. It doesn't really matter. It depends purely on what you would prefer to replace. I prefer to keep Storm of Ukko because I am treating this as a caster build rather than a melee build. But if you're using a melee build, which is completely reasonable on Kullervo because this is, after all, a melee frame, I'm just converting it into a caster frame, you would then you would then you would put Reave on Storm of Ukko instead of the first slot, and then you would still have whatchamacallit, Wrathful Advance, which is also a very, very good ability. So it's up to you whether you want to replace your first or fourth. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this build. So again, you don't have to copy me replacing the first ability. You could replace either one. The second and third abilities are what makes this build, are what are critical for this build and pretty much every other one, in my opinion. Have a nice day, guys.